What is the end game? It is integration, seamless integration into society. The hybrids are integrating into society. They look like us, they sound like us, they dress like us. They are us in every way except they can control us. That is a threat beyond anything that the human race has yet to face. And I think that people need to wake up to the reality of what's happening. UFO sightings and so forth, that's old hat. It's time to wake up to the abduction phenomenon and to have an understanding of how far advanced it truly is. The enemy is in the gates. That's the reality.
Rather than ask, is there proof that aliens have visited the planet, I guess the way I would look at it is there evidence? Is there good evidence? So if you're willing to keep it at that level, I would say there's an overwhelming amount of good evidence that non-humans or another civilization's been visiting our world. I would say the answer is yes. And for me, the evidence is very strong in the words of our own government officials and our own military personnel. The thing that I've studied more than anything else are military reports of UFOs. I've studied them a lot. There's an overabundance of declassified military literature describing events that should never have happened, that don't make any sense in the 1940s or 50s or 60s or beyond. And so when you see enough of these, you really have to ask yourself, what is going on? If it were one or two reports of a disc-shaped object zigzagging or instantly accelerating or completely outperforming our best jets, you might think, okay, maybe that's some misinterpretation or something else. But this has gone on over and over again. On top of that, what I would emphasize is the response by our military authorities and by our intelligence community authorities has been very serious.
One of the questions I ask as a hypnotherapist is, have you on any level agreed to this experience, on any level? And I'm talking to that superconscious part of them. And interestingly, most will say, yes, before I came here. So we're talking about on a soul level. So the alien intervention will be something they've orchestrated as part of their human journey.
People can't understand that we cannot look at their technology and they don't care about our technology. What we care about is who these beings are and what they're up to, why they're doing this. We don't know how they get here. We don't know if they come from millions of miles away or 10 feet away from a different world or whatever. We don't know that stuff. But we do know what they are doing to us. That we know.
Modern thought follows principles of the Big Bang Theory and Darwinism to explain the origins of the universe and human evolution. But what if other factors played a role in our development and the genesis of our belief systems? Thousands of years ago, Paleolithic man decorated cave walls with images they saw in daily life. Animals, hunting parties, seasonal rituals, and celestial bodies. But also appearing in ancient art were alien-looking beings with large heads and eyes, and sometimes aboard strange-looking craft. As Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, and Rome flourished, depictions of humanoid beings and flying objects remained consistent in artwork and literature. ET-related iconography appeared around the globe. In indigenous cultures such as the Central American Mayan and Aztec, South American Incan, Aboriginal Australians, and North American Anasazi. Is it a coincidence this imagery was consistent during a time when these civilizations had no contact with each other? During the European Renaissance, paintings, drawings, and mosaics showed UFOs in the sky, men in aircraft, and even laser beams. And strange objects are seen observing religious events, such as the birth of Jesus and the crucifixion. During the Black Plague, many sightings of cigar-shaped vessels were reported, similar to German reports in 1561 in Nuremberg and 1566 in Basel, involving similar-shaped objects. The first documented sighting in the Americas was March 1st, 1639. Massachusetts Governor John Winthrop wrote about 3 men who observed a light in the sky above their boat. Over the course of a few hours, the mysterious light darted back and forth between the men and the village of Charlestown, approximately 2 miles away. The governor wrote that when the strange apparition finally faded, the 3 men were stunned to find themselves 1 mile upstream, as if the light had transported them. Modern UFO sightings began in 1947 when civilian pilot Kenneth Arnold spotted a formation of flying saucers near Mount Rainier in Washington. Shortly after Arnold's sighting, a saucer-shaped craft reportedly crashed outside Roswell, New Mexico. Headlines read, "RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region." Although the military claimed the incident was a weather balloon, UFO mania ran rampant in the United States, with sightings reported daily across the country. In the name of national security, Air Force General Nathan Twining launched Project Sign in 1948, the first of many military intelligence programs tasked with collecting information on UFO sightings. Over the next several decades, one strange case followed another, with many providing compelling photo evidence, video evidence, and trace physical evidence. So what do these modern documented experiences reveal? The same flying objects and beings appearing on cave walls, described in ancient text and adorned on Renaissance paintings. If beings have been present since prehistoric times, what influence have they had on our beliefs? On our evolution? Have they been using us as lab rats with the intention of replacing us? Are they part of a predestined biblical narrative? Or is their intention to aid in evolution, guiding us to be galactic neighbors who use advancing technology and wisdom for universal good? And what role do government and military leaders play in fostering the various narratives surrounding ET existence? Are they harboring a secret? Propagating a lie? Protecting humanity from invasion? Exactly how much do they know about the ET agenda? Valid and important questions, whose answers will likely determine the future of our planet.
People think of the UFO phenomenon as being modern. It isn't. In ancient days, there were far less of the things that we have now that people misidentify. No satellites, no weather balloons, no aircraft, there has never been a time when people haven't seen strange things in the sky.
From my perspective, the UFO engagement against mankind goes back probably 450,000 years. And I'm basing that off of the Sumerian tablets, the Enuma Elish and the 7 tablets of creation, and also the Atra-Asis epic. According to those tablets, around close to almost 500,000 years ago is when these beings came in from another star system.
We either had very strange-looking human beings back a long time ago, or the people, the indigenous people of those time periods, witnessed and saw some very strange things on this planet. You look at the Nazca lines in Peru. You can only see them from above. Who are they showing it to? I think they're showing it to extraterrestrials. Caves all over this planet have depictions of beings with big heads, like the alien greys, whatever they may be.
They are drawing what they see. They're not being, as I say, particularly symbolic about it. They're seeing something anomalous in the sky. To them it would be magical or something part of their reality. They would have no understanding of it, but they would find in some way it attracts them because they were drawing everything from animals, they were drawing all their surroundings, you know, what they were actually seeing.
Those traditions and their whole entire religious belief systems and cultural belief systems are based upon that. That was handed down through generations as history. Those cultures do not believe it to be a mythology, they understand it to be fact.
They really didn't have a lot of time to just make up like these elaborate stories for entertainment. They really only wrote down and drew what they saw and what they experienced. So when you see a cave painting that looks like an alien, right next to it you'll see what looks like a normal cattle or a normal sheep because they knew what they looked like. So if you see something that they've drawn that looks like it doesn't belong on Earth or looks alien to us, it probably was.
They have names for these beings, and one of them is called the Wandjina, and it's all over cave drawings, the being with the big black eyes. And they came from the 7 Sisters, and they came down and they taught Aborigines how to live. They taught them about amethyst stones for healing, all these kinds of things they were learning from these beings that they saw as visiting us.
When you take a look at cave paintings, at early paintings, at paintings from different cultures, if you look hard enough, you're going to see what looks like UFOs or aliens or something like that in them. The evidence for them actually being UFOs or aliens is 0. And we will never have the evidence for it one way or the other unless our little friends tell us.
If we were to see something inexplicable today, we could write about it, we could report it. There are websites. Go back 500 years, go back 1,000 years. You see something that's inexplicable and you don't have writing, most of the cultures didn't. So how would they process that experience? Well, they would talk about it to each other. It would become part of their oral history. And so what happens is over centuries, you've got all of these oral traditions that exist. We don't have a time machine that's going to take us back to see exactly what was going on there. So really all that we have are these stories and some artifacts, and we do our best trying to put a picture together. It's always going to be incomplete. That's the problem.
They've been here for a very long time. I think they've impacted our society in ways that if we looked at it from a third-party perspective, we go, oh yeah, well that makes sense, but we don't know, or most of us don't know anyway. And that could be genetically, could be technology-wise, could be social. There's many different ways that they could have impacted us.
They're all subject to interpretation. And in many of them, if you want to see alien technology and flying saucers, that's exactly what you're going to see. Now, with that being said, our visitors have been here ever since man walked the face of this planet. They had open contact with the people of this planet. They actually would go ahead and teach man a lot of things that was unknown to them at that time. Therefore, you find certain ancient civilizations were more advanced than others. And we would scratch our heads wondering, how did this happen?
You can find this in Homer and the Trojan War. I mean, the gods were on different sides. Some of the Sumerian texts talk about the gods being on different sides of their war, and they've been using humans as proxies because they just have not been able to kind of like resolve their own conflicts without too much damage to themselves, but great damage to our own global civilization.
Modern times, people, when they say something's a myth, they say it's a false story. The myths in the ancient time, the stories of the gods, people believed them. It was reality. Just like people today, Christian people, believe the biblical stories like they're reality. But in fact, the biblical stories are myths. They're just as mythological as the ancient Greek, Roman, Nordic myths were. It's the same thing. The thing is that the Christian, the Judeo-Christian people have been indoctrinated for 16 centuries to believe that these myths are historical reality, but they're not.
Human beings are pretty stubborn, you know, and until your back's against the wall, you're not inclined to listen. You really, you know, you've got to be really pushed. And I think that's what's happening now, is that we're really getting to a point where people are finally waking up, saying, hold on a minute, this is not cool.
How much of all that is attributable to those things and how much is actually literally real in a physical, there it is sense, I don't know. The skeptics have to be right every day. The believers only need to be right once. And if just one of those instances, whether it's historical or modern day, turns out to be the real thing, then we are in game-changing, paradigm-shifting territory.
Historical evidence suggests we've been visited by and interacting with ETs for millennia. If true, what's the purpose of alien abductions and hybridization experiments? More importantly, what's the end game? Answers vary widely depending on who you ask.
I think what you have to do is look at who is saying what and what is their credibility, what are their scientific backgrounds. Then make up your own mind whether you think what they're saying is right or not. Everybody's entitled to an opinion, and everybody has a different view over extraterrestrials, what they're doing, why they're doing what they are doing.
The philosopher Bertrand Russell wrote a book called Religion and Science. He said, look, so a scientific thinker is always thinking provisionally. They're not thinking in terms of absolutes. Now, scientists are human beings just like everyone else, and they sometimes slip up and they can become absolutists. But science itself is always filled with one provisional hypothesis and theory after another. And hypotheses and theories can be revised.
I have learned that I can't be static in a position that I take because I don't know what's around the corner. Tomorrow that I might hear more information that completely changes what I believe today. Some people can't do that. They don't want to do it. They make a choice to stay put. And I think when somebody is in fear themselves, then everything they're going to see is going to be a fear-based perspective. I think you have to be aware at first that you've been programmed into a limited mindset. So as soon as you become aware of that, then you start to expand anyway, because you're not allowing that to be your reality. You're saying, I believe I'm something greater than this, or I can achieve something greater than this.
You can play the game, what if aliens, what if this, what if that? But at the end of the day, how do you know that you're not being deceived on every level? How do you know? How can you know?
There's one very important point of agreement here, which is that these beings are doing something in an attempt to transform us.
There's some people who believe that extraterrestrials are here to replace us, and that they're doing it in a very methodical way, creating these hybrids. Some may be on this planet now, others could be in spaceships or on the other planet, waiting to be brought back by the millions to take over good old planet Earth. Why would they do this to a civilization? Why would they want us wiped out? Maybe one thing is that they think we're going to wipe ourselves out and that they want the planet to continue to exist. And so they will feed it with the civilization. Maybe they know an asteroid is going to hit the planet in 50 years from now. Who knows? That could wipe out civilizations too. So there's that possibility that what they're doing is creating a seed farm for the future to keep this planet vibrant and alive. And then there's that theory, as Dr. Jacobs would say, they're here to take over, and we're out.
based off of 7 to 8 million people coming forward saying they've been abducted by aliens and have had different types of operations done, and there may be a hybridization program, it's possible they could be inserting themselves into the population and that they could be walking amongst us. Like Thoth says in the Emerald Tablets, he says he would transfer his consciousness from one avatar body to another, and then he would walk amongst men, but unlike a man.
Hybrids, who Dr. Jacobs calls hybrids, advanced hybrids that look like us in every way, except there's some interesting faculties that they've retained from their insectulin progenitors, that these beings are already integrating into human society. The infiltration is happening now and has been happening for some time. According to Dr. Jacobs' work and others in the field, abductees are now reporting that they have been, for the last several years, perhaps the last decade, actively training hybrids and hybrids in human society and how to integrate into human society. Some of them are trained to fly UFOs. Some of them are trained to neurally engage with other humans. Some of them are trained to use some of the instrumentation that the aliens use. Some of them are being prepared for the change.
What I'm getting, often as not, is something completely different. And the way they're understanding their hybrid nature is they're bringing the best of many species into the human form to be part of this shift. And when they say they're taking over, look, we're all hybrids, we've taken over the world. We did it once they manipulated us in the first place. What's the big deal? All they're doing now is making sure that we're bringing more programs in to help with that process. So taking over what? We're already here.
The real question that they've got to be asking is there an agenda that's going on that they need to deal with? What can we learn about their motivations based on what it appears they're doing? So when you talk to a number of abductees and they are telling you about their interaction with these human-looking hybrids who are participating in an abduction program that is designed to infiltrate our society over and over again, in which they, as Jacobs describes, have the ability to exert neurological control over you and infiltrate your thoughts and control your thinking. That's unsettling, and yet that's his results. Now, the real question we need to ask is there a flaw in his methodology that we can critique to allow us to say, no, we're not dealing with that? I've tried to look for those flaws, and in my opinion, he has a stronger methodology than the Ascension, Love and Light camp, which I don't think has done nearly the depth of analysis of abductees that he has done. It's my opinion. Like his abductees, the people that he deals with them over and over, and he goes deeper and deeper. He does that because he doesn't charge anything. It's free. And so he's able to have people coming back to him. And his point has always been, you're not going to get the truth in the first or second time when you do hypnotic regression. The truth is buried deeper.
Dr. David Jacobs conducted extensive research on alien abductees, including more than 750 hypnotic regressions. His investigation indicates a disturbing revolution is underway.
We have spread around the world and conquered as much as we possibly can. Western civilization has, and even Eastern civilization to a large extent. We don't know whether this is true of other beings in the universe or not, but it certainly is true of what humans have done. My best guess is, and this is a guess, is that yeah, they're doing the same thing. Yes, this is what they do too, just like us. I've got a coterie of abductees who are coming to me over the years, many, many, many different abductees. Some are staying for years, and I'm looking at what they're saying to me for years as the years go by. Other ones have one session with me and that's it. And there's everybody in the middle. Abductees have told me accounts whereby in the future, they will have a job to do. The one that people say the most of all the crazy things to say, not knowing that other people are saying this too, is crowd control. When they get older, they will be required to stand on the corner of a street. There will be a large number of humans or of people running down the street, and your job is to say, just keep going, just keep moving, just keep moving. everything will be okay, just keep moving. That's what their job will be in the future. You have to try to imagine if this is coming out of people's imaginations and it's not happening. Crowd control would not be the #1 memory that they had about what's going to happen in the future. It's just nonsensical. Then they were beginning to change a little bit and say other things too, not knowing that other people were changing. Then they began to change a lot, not knowing what other people were changing. And what they were describing was that the ones on board who looked really, really human were coming down and trying to learn what it's like to walk among us, to be human. And at that point, I knew it's integration into the society prior to takeover. That's the best way I can say it. They can control us and we can't control them. They are superhumans, so to speak, and we aren't.
The implications of colonization are difficult to comprehend. Integration before takeover is straight out of Hollywood. Yet Dr. Jacobs makes a compelling argument that hybrid beings live among us, undetected.
Over the decades, people have talked about how these hybrids are looking more and more human. Very human. In fact, just plain human. Wearing human clothes and acting human, etc., etc. And then people began to tell us that they're moving in, that they're moving in apartments, that they're living here. And if it's happening here in the United States, it's happening everywhere. There's nothing unique about the United States and the UFO phenomenon. But the key problem here, and here is still the key problem, they can control us and we can't control them, and you can't ever forget that. That is the most significant thing about this. Whether they're going to take over or not, they can control the human mind. The only way that I can figure out what's going on is that ultimately this is an infiltration into the society where they can control us and we cannot control them. I don't know what's going to happen after that. I fear the worst. I think that these beings on board UFOs have done this before. We can't be the very first planet that this ever happened to. And they can't be the very first beings who ever did this to a planet. You have to think widely. This probably has happened many times in the past. And it's happening to us now. And I do think that this is ultimately, as abductees have said over and over again, that this will be a takeover.
And no segment of humanity is immune from this nefarious agenda. Money and social status will not save you from ET colonization.
I have talked with people who have PhDs and MDs, people who are university professors, people who are physicians, people who are attorneys, LLDs, who are abductees and who say X, Y, and Z just like everybody else. I've talked with 5 different people who are members of the clergy. They all say the same thing. I've talked with people who are in graduate school and everybody else in between. It doesn't matter. The religion doesn't matter. None of that matters. They all say the same thing. It's important information. It's the most important thing I could ever do in my life, and I think that Bud felt that way too. I think that most serious UFO researchers feel that way, and it's something that I'm glad I did. And at the same time, if I hadn't have done it, I probably would have lived a better life. Probably had a happier, jauntier aspect to me. But I hope that it convinces some people who want to look into this to do so seriously and properly. That would be good. That would be a tremendous help, obviously, for the whole society, for the whole world, if I may talk in these large terms. Anybody can do what I'm doing, as long as abductees are willing. Anybody can do it as long as they're doing it right. The problem with it is that everybody thinks it's crazy, and if you do it, you have to keep your mouth shut because they'll think you're crazy. And if you don't charge money, then you're just wasting time for many people, and it's a tough one. It's a hard one. But there were others who did research, and they came up with good material as well. So I hate to be one of the last few.
Not all belief systems associated with abductions and hybrid programs are doom and gloom. Many believe alien intervention is leading the next wave of human evolution. Mary Rodwell has researched more than 3,000 alien abduction cases, concluding that extraterrestrial encounters, specifically those focused on hybridization, are part of a genetic engineering program. The goal? An upgrade of humanity, leading ultimately to a shift in consciousness.
When I started out, I didn't know what to make of this. Mostly I saw people that were highly traumatized, and all I was looking at is how can I best help them through this trauma, because that's my job as a counselor. What I discovered was, as I was exploring this with them, that there was this huge range from the really terrified to the ones that said, for me, my interactions have been the most beautiful, meaningful thing in my life. Without them, I wouldn't be here. The difference is what that soul has chosen to experience this time. Do you choose to see things as a way of gaining more understanding, more perception of what feeds your soul, or do you want to say, I've decided I'm going to be a victim this time round and everything's horrible and everybody's horrible?
Rodwell has found strong esoteric undercurrents associated with alien abduction encounters, which comes directly from her clients as they navigate and share their extraordinary experiences.
When I take somebody into an experience, it's very important that they have an understanding of why they've been taken, what's going on. With their fear, it's fear of the unknown, not necessarily fear of what's happened, because often they don't even remember what's happened. They don't know whether it's traumatic or not traumatic. It's just they know something's happened and that's scary. So sometimes the fear is literally because I don't know what the hell's happening. There's a gentleman that was quite comfortable with his ET going on board craft and what have you, but he said when those big eyes start coming towards me, he went into absolute trauma and fear. And he said, Mary, I want to deal with that. I want to know why that affects me that way. And so he was a very courageous soul, and I said, well, right, I'm going to take you to that point so we can find out what's happening, because I said, what do you think's happening? He says, well, I suppose I'm scared they're going to take me over or something like this. He said, but I don't know. So I lead this gentleman slowly to seeing the big eye coming towards him, because again, I could see on his body that it was triggering like this. And I said, it's all right, you're still okay, nothing's happened. You know, the eye's still coming closer, and it's still coming closer. And it got to a point where he was almost ready to jump from the chair because the eye was that close. So I said, now what's happening? Oh, he said, they're just giving me information.
Helping connect the dots is critically important for those trying to understand who they really are.
We are them, and they are us. That we've just chosen to come into this meat vehicle for an experience as a, in a materialistic, matter-placed environment. But many of those that come to me and explore their understanding of themselves will say, my family's out there. But we are orchestrators of our own journey. And talking about some experiences, Tracy Taylor was actually telling me that she'd agreed before she came here with the Greys that she would allow them to take genetic material and they would assist her with her intuitive artistic abilities. So that was the trade that she described. She's one of many that begin to understand that this is often a cooperative thing, even if you don't fully remember it. Talked to one 10-year-old about him coming into this incarnation. He talked about being a will-o'-the-wisp and then describing that he picked his life format and then he was inside Mummy's tummy, and that's what he actually remembers. So this isn't just one, this is many that I've worked with, over hundreds. But he said, I've come here because I've come to help the planet with its pollution. And this is my job this time. This is why I've come in with my awareness, so I can do that. So many of these new ones that call themselves starseeds are actually coming in with a mandate to assist with the evolution of the species. So it's not an us and them, because we're actually all part of them anyway.
The link between ET encounters and the genetic disposition to experience them is something modern DNA science doesn't comprehend. But many people believe they are biological hybrids who have incarnated on Earth to help us.
My name is Vivian Chauvette, and I am what's called a biological Arcturian hybrid. And so let's just define very quickly just the terminology of hybrid, which is the genetic blend of typically of a father star seed, a father star being, and a human mother. So in my case, that has been the case for me, that my biological father is Arcturian, and of course my mother is human. We have come here to help humanity to ascend back, to bring the ascension process a reality, to bridge, to bring forth our knowledge and our expertise, because we have been assisting many other homeworlds to do that. This is not the first planet or the first civilization that we have been assisting to do so. In my case, being an hybrid, I'm here on the planet to bring also a physical presence to anchor the frequencies of the Arcturians, being what's called an ambassador, a bridge between humanity and our collective. And of course, the positive side of being here in physical form is that is also I'm a clear conduit, if you want, for them to come through and to be able to communicate with each other, to be able to, our presence allow those shifts, those paradigm shifts on the planet in a consciousness and also at a planetary level, but also with everyone with whom we come in contact with, and to be able to bring that multidimensional aspect. Think of it as a lotus flower that's just blossoming more and more petal by petal, but we bring also the interdimensional level to that, so you can understand your place not only here on this planet and in your life, but also your place in the universe.
The evolution is to help this materialistic society to evolve into a more spiritual awareness, understanding our link in terms of consciousness, so we can be part of them and part of the galactic community, because that's our heritage. Millions of people on this planet are having interactions because it's a consciousness thing. It's targeting the planet and human consciousness.
Consciousness is an ever-moving energy. It's kind of like the planet spiraling through space. It doesn't really stop. Most of what is happening here can be explained scientifically, so science is really, in my opinion, a study of the past of what is. Science isn't so much about what could be. That's kind of left to the prophets and the artists, and on this earth it feels like a clipboard and charts and a lot of left brain and putting things into boxes to explain how we survive. But if science develops an open mind, it won't be so one-dimensional.
Science has a place, and I think it's very important to interpret our material world, and that I think in itself. But we already know that there's nothing objective, that everything that we see is subjective, because we're going through our own perceptions, which are already, limited by our own programming, our own lens, our own belief systems. All of those things will alter and change what we perceive.
So is science leading us further away from acknowledging and exploring our gut feelings? And is alien intervention playing a role in reawakening our higher level intuition?
That materialistic, mechanistic view, basically we've shut ourselves down intuitively from that aspect of ourselves, or that part of ourselves that is multidimensional. The spiritual aspect is one way of talking about it. Our intuition, our sensing, knowing, feeling, all of those have been marginalized as not being okay. It's the first time it's been so significant that people would not change their experience, even though initially it was scary, understandably so, because when you don't know what's happening, or you're told it's not real, therefore you must be crazy, then of course you're going to be scared. And that's part of the problem, is we have a psychology that doesn't take in multidimensional experiences as part of human experience. So what do? You send them towards, the psychiatrist. This person is psychotic or is schizophrenic or whatever, when in fact all they may be doing is opening up intuitively and multidimensionally.
When you are having awareness, you are having an expanded state of consciousness. You see and you know, but we've just begun this new golden age. And this new golden age is going to last a very long time, and this is the time where extraterrestrials come back. So they've been here before, But because our consciousness is evolving, we're going to open ourselves to an intergalactic community, which has lots of implications. So it's an individual event, but it's a massive planetary event that affects the entire universe. We have a very unique planet here, and there's a lot going on. But once we figure out what unites us, we don't have to be worried about a takeover, because what's stronger than a whole bunch of people getting along peacefully on an entire planet?
How many people have said, I feel that I can do so much more, but I just feel it's been contained or put under a lid. And that's why it's called spark of awakening. The collective, the consciousness within people, more and more. What sensation? What are your senses? What are your gifts? It's just simply to step into your consciousness and to go, I am making the choice now to return to my true self. And what we do is to ensure that we walk with you to give you the proper guidance, the tools, the directions to understand from you your gift and how they awaken right here, right now. And I know that aspect will speak volume to a lot of people.
But we have been so programmed that anything outside of that 3D box is not okay, that you are having a mental problem, an aberration, in other words, that anyone who experiences it now is, oh, there's something wrong with you, you need to go and see the doctor, you shouldn't be experiencing this. And yet anyone who's followed their intuition has found it to be absolutely fabulously useful. In fact, the quantum hologram explains every experience that we have, and that we've only really been using part of ourselves. We've been going around with one eye when in fact we have two. And we've been denying that because of fear of judgment, that we might be going crazy, when in fact we've been limiting ourselves in the Western world for many, many years for the very fact that we've been programmed out of what we truly are.
Well, wherever we work with people, we always go backwards into identifying what their roots are. Think about just when you came back here in this incarnation, you were born into this identity, and there's a lot of program put into the collective consciousness that keeps people believing like in the loop, like always the same movie playing out, that you come, you're born, you grow up, you believe what you've been taught, and you successfully become an adult, you grow old, and you die. But this is the false paradigm that's been implanted here, like loops playing endlessly. So the human race has been indoctrinated over and over to believe that, oh, you only have 2 strands of DNA, you have this and that, and you have, it's impossible to do this, this, and that. But you have so much more to that, above and beyond. The human race, a race of giants of light, I mean, it's just infinite potential of natural ability that has been repressed over time through the generations to different influence. If you look just at history, just the history of the earth, do you really know what the true history of the earth is? Not really. You're going to learn what you've been taught to a system that is designed to keep you in a certain level. We are breaking free from this. We are breaking away from that paradigm, and we are returning to our state of who we really are, individually and collectively.
If you open your mind to possibilities, then you start on that journey to explore things that maybe have challenged you even, and thought, well, why does that challenge me? Why have I got a limit around there? Because I believe that what we can do is unlimited. It's just that we've been told that there's only so much we can do. And that programming has stopped us from expanding and being all that we can be. But there will always be those that really don't want their paradigm to change. And I've always said that if a UFO landed on their front lawn, they'd say it was a fire engine, because they do not want to know. And I don't even think there's any point in with those individuals, because that's where they want to be. They're happy with that, you know, that's fine. But for those that are undecided, just allow yourself to explore, to start looking at everything that's telling us that everything we've ever been programmed into, in fact, is a limited version of truth. Whether you go to archaeology, anthropology, everything we're being told is a limited version. And that is what happens when you have contact.
Believers of the ascension narrative are a stark contrast to those who embrace a frightening colonization scenario. A third belief perspective asserts, with tremendous conviction, the Bible directly addresses the existence of extraterrestrials and hybridization.
There's about 85% of the world is religious. And those 85% of the world that are religious are worshiping deities or beings that if you talk to them and say, well, where is your God from? Oh, he's from there, or he's from there. Okay, was he born on earth? No, my God is not an earth being, he's from another place. So in true reality, you're talking about an alien. They don't want to really admit it, but in true reality, all religions are worshiping aliens. And there's more evidence and proof for the alien theory than there is for, like you say, a person in the sky with a magic wand that's just creating things out of thin air. Even with the altered content and a lot of the books that have been left out, you can still come to the assumption of talking about getting a new body and getting a new name and coming back and all this. It's really talking about a form of reincarnation, recycled energies, but they don't want to see it that way because that's not the way it's been pitched to them. And they've kind of really taken the pitch, hook, line, and sinker. And if it was the end of the world, it would have happened a long time ago. Everybody, oh, we're in the end days. I think things are better now than they ever were before in the past.
My predisposition is to look at everything historically because that's my training. I'm trained as a historian. And so I look at the Bible as a historical document. And from that point of view, I see it very differently than a theologically inclined person would do. And it's the same with the New Age side of it. So I look at the Christian and the New Age perspectives as much more similar than they would see it among themselves, I imagine. To me, they're two opposite sides of the same coin.
What disturbed me was how much has been edited in all of these different. There's been some gospels, for example, completely dismissed. Reincarnation was dismissed. These were intelligences that came to our planet. Some of them certainly, I believe, interfered and manipulated human DNA to create Homo sapiens sapiens. And there's an enormous amount of evidence now to show that's so. But of course, in past times with more primitive peoples, if you see a being doing what you would see as magical things, you would interpret them to be gods. So I'm afraid that my understanding of the gods is with a little g, that they were extraterrestrials that manifested many abilities through their technology that were seen as gods. So I don't see any of them as gods at all.
The Egyptians did Jesus long before there was Jesus. Horus, Isis, and Osiris. That's the original Trinity. Look it up. Osiris foreshadowed what later happened with Jesus. He's the resurrected God too. There have been resurrected gods throughout human history. It comes from agriculture. Ancient people created entire belief systems based on the idea of resurrection. From the Nile Valley to ancient Sumer, Dionysus in Greece was a resurrected god. He was a god of fertility. You know, what we know about the historical Jesus is one thing, but what we really also know is that after he died, all of these earlier belief systems kind of got pushed into him, and he became Dionysus. Paul of Tarsus, the Apostle Paul, lived in a city that was a center of the Dionysian mystery religion, where you drink the wine. That was Dionysus. He was the god of wine. Where do you think the Catholic Church gets the whole thing of drinking the blood of Christ? It's a Dionysian ritual.
They interpreted these beings in terms of gods and goddesses. I mean, the ancients, they weren't that sophisticated, let's say, in thinking. Don't forget, they lived in this cosmos like this. You have maybe the gods are up there, and then we're down here on Earth, and that's the center of the universe. For them to say, you came from another planet, what other planet? They would have understood it, in their own mind as being gods. I think the Greco-Romans were completely open to it as far as they could understand that phenomenon of hybridization in their own, mindset, their own worldview, cosmology, theology, anthropology. That's how they understood it. When Christianity came along, they're the ones that would have excluded it. This is what the Greeks and the Romans did. They systematized things. They brought it down to a logical level where, a human mind could comprehend it. Why didn't they include Enoch in the Old Testament? Same reason that the bishops in the 4th century didn't include the Gospel of James or the Gospel of Thomas in their New Testament. See, these are the guys who had control and created the Bible as we know it. Book of Enoch, there are 7 heavens. It tells you how. There are other books, the ascension of Isaiah. You go up through the heavens, and it describes what's going on. There are different beings in each heaven. It's in the Apocrypha and the Pseudepigrapha that you find the blatant possibilities of, I think, beings, extraterrestrial beings, all kinds of beings in the heavens out there.
Religious construct is and has always been problematic for humanity, always been used as a mechanism of control, always. But that is not to say that the gospel is not true. However, what we have to understand is that there has been a concerted effort to cover up the reality of the world before the flood of Noah, of that hybrid empire that existed in the pre-flood world. Hidden in the vaults beneath the Vatican is every evidence that if it were brought to light, the artifacts that they have would absolutely confirm and verify the biblical narrative concerning the Watchers, concerning the hybrid empire. But when I say a biblical narrative, a biblical paradigm, I'm speaking to something that most Christians across the earth have no clue about.
There's a thread of prophecy that goes from the first book to the last book, from Genesis to the book of Revelation. And it's not what people think it is. Some of this has been obfuscated from the masses, literally for thousands of years. And so people don't know, but there's a prophetic thread that goes throughout the entire scope of Scripture, which is incredible. And there's someone, call him God, that's outside space and time as we know it, and somehow can call out the end before the beginning and the beginning before the end, and he does it with great specificity. How is that possible? How is that possible? And of course, no one knows where he came from. The apostles who had been with Yeshua, Jesus, for basically 3 years, their lives were suddenly turned upside down. So basically, you've got the 12 Stooges, with all due respect, but you've got the 12 Stooges, who are a bunch of illiterate fishermen for the most part, that become the pillars of this new movement. And the first day when Peter gets up, he's under the power of something which he's never had in his life before. And that power is from the Spirit of a living God, which has come into his life. That power has the power to change a person. And I believe it's on the cellular level. I believe it's changing the DNA. What does that sound like to you? And I'm just going to jump ahead here. We know from the abduction phenomena that people are taken through windows, walls, and ceilings. When we go back and look at the biblical prophetic narrative, we can see that the same type of the manipulation of space, time, matter, and energy is taking place with those guys as it is in modernity. And that's a lot of food for thought, in my opinion. It's exactly what happened in the book of Enoch. So when we take what we hear in modernity and we travel back in time to when Enoch was written and the biblical prophetic narrative, this is what the fallen angels were doing. They were coming with technology, real technology, that changed everything. And guess what? The quid pro quo was, we'll give you this technology thousands of years ago, get this, if you give us access to the women. What does that sound like? That's right out of the abduction playbook.
This is the biblical paradigm, and within the biblical paradigm is the story from the beginning to the end. And everything that is happening on this planet, including the UFO phenomenon, including and especially the abduction phenomenon, fits perfectly into that paradigm. The objective, the grand objective, what's called the Great Plan in the occult, is to seat the man of sin on the throne of dominion over this planet.
Dark, ancient power, highly malevolent, highly charged, brilliant, but demented, which is driving this whole narrative to one point.
We're moving into what the technological world calls the hybrid age. The hybrid age represents a time on Earth in which human beings are going to merge with their technology. We're going to merge with our machines. That's one aspect of the hybrid age, the singularity, the point at which artificial intelligence becomes conscious, self-aware. But also the hybrid age refers to the genetic revolution. The question is why? What are the ramifications? What are the implications of humanity losing the genetic trademarks of what makes us human?
What is the truth? The truth is that God spoke everything into existence. We've abandoned that because that's way too supernatural, and we've clung on to Darwinism, which is just a theory which has never been proven. The biblical narrative says that. Everything reproduces according to its kind. So we've fled from the truth into this theory, man-made theory, and we've held on to that, which is now sacrosanct in both the scientific and the academic community. I mean, there's no doubt about that. The world runs on Darwin. I mean, it does. That's the prevailing paradigm. So he sends a strong delusion. People will believe a lie. This is the great deception. When they show up, they will have two things. The first thing is they'll have the free energy, which changes the planet. Everybody goes, hooray! It's the Trojan horse. The second thing they'll do is they'll have a little implant, and they'll say, guess what, folks? You take this implant, it's a DNA upgrade, and you'll live 300 to 500 years disease-free. The trouble is, there's a scripture and the biblical prophetic narrative which talks about specifically a mark that you'll take, that you won't be able to buy, sell, or trade. But the consequences of taking that mark are very, very severe. And you wind up in a very bad place because you take that mark. That mark, I believe, changes the host's DNA. You become a modern-day Nephilim. You become the seed of the serpent because it changes your DNA. Their seed will mingle with the seed of men. They will not cleave to them.
So DNA manipulation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I find that completely and utterly chilling and very sobering.
3 opposing endgames, yet all share a common thread. Extraterrestrials exist, they've been interacting with humans for ages, and they've been conducting hybrid experiments. So which came first, the existence of aliens or the mythos surrounding them? Did we fabricate belief constructs, or did they evolve from actual events shared over generations? Even more important, if this is all true, why such an effort to misdirect the masses? And who is manipulating the message? The modern UFO era began in the 1940s, producing decades of evidence suggesting the existence of advanced extraterrestrial beings. Many have asked, and continue to ask, how much does the government and military know about ETs and the alien agenda? And if we've indeed made contact, is our government complicit in covering it up?
The governments of the world have known about these advanced beings, these aliens coming to this planet for a very long time. We're talking about all the way back into the 1920s. This is what kind of set Hitler on his path to go discover some of these ancient technologies via ancient scripts and texts, visiting Tibet, talking to monks and everything else, trying to figure out how to create these advanced Hanabu anti-gravity type craft, and also weapons, the Wonder Weapon and all this other stuff he wanted to develop. So this goes back a very, very long time. America knew well about it. This is why we wanted to go and get all their scientists. People think Project Paperclip was just a couple of hundred people or less. It was 1,600 Nazis that we brought to America and put them in prominent positions of power almost immediately, put them in control of different technologies, different biology systems, the space program, even the CIA as well. And I think the end game for the United States military or the military-industrial complex as a whole is to be able to be #1 in space, because whoever controls space controls this planet.
Historically, we know that President Harry Truman, he was the guy on the scene in 1947 right up to beginning of 53. Harry Truman was briefed on a quarterly basis at the very least on UFOs. We know that the entire upper echelon of the defense community and the CIA were deeply concerned about UFOs. This is not speculation. We know that through the Eisenhower years of the 50s, that deep level of concern continued, while at the same time they're telling the public, nothing to see here, keep it moving, people, we've got it. No, it wasn't true. In the classified world, it was not true. They were deeply concerned about this. So they were lying.
In the 90s, the British government, the Ministry of Defence where I worked, we made a conscious decision to replace UFO with UAP. Not with the public, not with the media. That was never our intention. But internally. Our reason was this: we wanted to reframe the debate. We wanted to get away from the pop culture baggage, and we wanted to destigmatize it. Conversely, if you want to escalate it, All you've got to do is stick in the word threat.
The way I see it all is that it's very much compartmentalized. So you got these multiple projects dealing with various aspects of extraterrestrial life and technology. And what they do is they cover that secret project or that classified black project with a less classified project that deals with more conventional technologies. And so that's the cover. And so that way, if anyone snoops around into that topic, they immediately run into the problem that they are now inquiring about a classified program. And if they learn anything about that classified program, the state can come at them with a lot of heavy penalties. So that's their kind of security mechanism in place. This is very much a US-driven project, even though there are major allies like Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand that are very much involved with what the US has been doing, and from the get-go will be involved with Space Force. Then you've got other major nations like Russia, France, China, that are watching all this very, very closely. They're going to be doing their own indigenous efforts to replicate what the US is doing. But eventually there'll be some high-level degree of cooperation between these different national space forces that are being created.
When we say the government, we've got to be careful. The government is massive. It's a big labyrinth that's got a lot of money in there and many different competing departments and lots of classified places within which to hide. And we have to ask, does it act as a unified entity or not? And the answer is it doesn't. Private corporations that have a tremendous amount of power over the government. And it looks to me that what we have is private companies using government protection for their activities. This is what I think. So you could say the government knows, but problem is the information within government agencies, or is it proprietary in corporate entities? It's a messy system, but it looks to me that there is an element of where the government is involved, but we don't really have control over our system, and we don't really understand our system.
Why, after decades of trying to downplay all this and kind of disparage it, have we seen the narrative flip 180 degrees? And why are people now talking this up? And when I say people, I mean the military, the government, not the UFO community. In one sense, what better way than to get it into the paper of record? And of course, we all know what happened next. The subject transitioned out of the fringe into the mainstream, because the New York Times was quickly followed by the Washington Post, by Politico, and by most of the major TV networks. And that, to me, and again, I look at this as somebody who's done this sort of thing myself, it smacks to me of a sophisticated media manipulation campaign where you want to get across a message. Now, whether it's the government doing this or whether it's people who did it for the government but are now out of government and in the private sector is open for debate. So there are fingerprints over this, but we're not entirely sure, I think, whose fingerprints they are.
Testimony from courageous ex-military personnel confirms government involvement in several top-secret programs related to or in partnership with ETs. Clifford Stone, Dan Sherman, and Lynn Buchanan each did what they were told. By following orders, they were ultimately manipulated by the government they served. Once exposed to the realities, Stone, Sherman, and Buchanan no longer questioned the existence of ETs. A sergeant in the U.S. Army, Clifford Stone was involved in Project Moondust, a military operation charged with recovering UFO craft and extraterrestrial biological entities. As part of this unit, he was given access to an official guidebook containing information on 57 types of EBEs known to the military.
Forgive me if I get emotional. But, you know, I had things happen to me in my life. And these things I carried with me to the military, and the military used me for certain things. because of these events that occurred. What they called an interfacer. They couldn't teach that. They have to find people who have been chosen by our visitors to be followed throughout their entire life. And these people were the ones that would have to go ahead and interface. That means actually communicate with our visitors at crash sites. And one of the biggest problems I had, we always, if we captured some, we would say, well, they're our guests. And I got into a big argument with the guy I always called the colonel, who was the guy that was always overseeing me in any of these missions. And, I said, you know what? If they're our guests, we don't have to keep guns on them. We don't have to have armed troops watching them.
An electronic intelligence specialist in the U.S. Air Force, Technical Sergeant Dan Sherman spent 3 years as an intuitive extraterrestrial communicator in Project Preserve Destiny. During this time, he successfully communicated with more than one EBE.
Were you 2 layers or 50 layers removed?
I don't know, maybe 4, but that's just based on typical military, hierarchy. There's not a lot of layers, and there's probably even fewer in this, I would imagine. There has to be continuity over the years, and that can only be done through a shadow government, because at some point you're going to get some wayward congressman or whoever that doesn't want to play the game here. And so I don't think it has anything to do with the elected leaders. Honestly, I think it has to do with the military hierarchy. The military has a system by which they classify everything, the access to things, and being able to keep it from our enemy. That's the main goal, obviously, although they have to keep it from the people too, if they're going to keep it from the enemy, because if the people know about it, then the enemy knows about it. Everybody who has this problem with the military being so secret, well, there's a reason for that. It's not necessarily to hide it from the populace, it's just that that's what they have to do. So they have this system in place that has the different classification levels, and it brings down the access to less and less and less people. And the higher it goes, the more they have to research your background and what your motivations might be. If you have a connection to somebody who's in China, your dad is a Chinese national, and maybe your dad is in a tech company, well, you may not get access to certain things. So they just have to take each individual and look at it. When you first start out, it's for official use only. Basically, if you have the job, in the military, then you need it for your particular job, then you know about it. And for official use only, basically everybody knows about it if they really wanted to find out. There's different levels of security within the Black Project too. And so once you get, and that's within the top secret onion of the normal military. Within the top secret, then you get these programs that are classified under certain code words. And then within the Black Project, they have different classification levels too. The more important you are to the project, the higher level of knowledge that you have within that. Above the Black is gray. And that is what I know of anyway, is the most secretive onion, so to speak, within all the onions.
A sergeant first class in the U.S. Army, Lynn Buchanan was a remote viewing expert tasked with comparing and contrasting ET and human psychic ability. He classified different known ET races into 4 main categories: psychic friendly, psychic unfriendly, non-psychic friendly, and non-psychic unfriendly. The military's remote viewing program, codenamed Stargate Project, was declassified to our knowledge in 1995.
We were there to collect intelligence. And so using the controlled remote viewing, we would describe locations, describe events. The training that was developed got to where we could access people mentally. And so we were constantly being tasked to give the emotional conditions of captured soldiers, the plans and intentions of foreign military and political leaders, things like that. But it was all intelligence gathering. There was no active mental work. You may read their minds, but you don't put anything in it. period. I mean, that was the rule.
And the military took this remote viewing capability very seriously.
We were just an adjunct intelligence source. In order to get a dependability rating, you have to prove yourself. So we would document, we would database everything. 82.7 overall accuracy rate is one of the highest of any intelligence group. And we had a dependability rating for every viewer. They're this good at describing the color, they're this good at describing the shape. Overall, they're this good and dependable. This wasn't a bunch of psychics doing woo-woo stuff. I mean, this was military people doing documented, data-based, hard-nosed, no-nonsense work.
I held back some things, like my locations where I was at, because it is a very touchy subject. Because they connect it to Black projects, every gray project is co-located with the Black project. They have to have that extra layer of security in there. And so when you are working on a gray project, you also are working on a Black project. If you release Black project information, there are enough people in the government where they could try you for that. They could go after you for releasing that information. If you release gray information, you are most likely going to also release information that's sensitive to the Black project. It's a very well done system for keeping things secret. And what I didn't do is I didn't reveal anything about the Black project that I worked on, which would have lent a little bit more credibility to what I was talking about with the gray project, but I couldn't. So I got this flack where no, he was just a sergeant and he worked at he was just admin. Well, no, if I could actually say what I was doing in the Black project, then you could say, oh yeah, that's not what he was doing. But, you know, I can't, so.
It was not top secret. The controlled remote viewing was never classified. The fact that the military was using it as an espionage technique, that was classified. The units and agencies who tasked us were our customers, and that was highly classified. The different three-letter agencies that would task us and get information, that was highly classified. At that time, I still had my top secret and above top secret background, but actually the unit itself was classified secret, not top secret. Late 1995, the CIA came out and said there had been a unit, but it was totally ineffective, and so it was disbanded. Well, we were disbanded 7 times, I think, while I was there. And people would find out who we were, what we did, and they would totally disband our unit. Doesn't exist anymore. And the next day they would come back and they would say, okay, you're in a new unit now. Here's your new unit security stamps. Continue on, and we continue on. That little notice came out to the public, and all of a sudden it just went wild, and there were reporters driving around DC looking for these signs of palm readers on the front lawn and going up and saying, what is remote viewing? All of the incorrect information came out to the internet and to the public. And of course, I think it was the Washington Post, big, huge banner on the front page, something about U.S. military uses psychic spies, you know, and it was all garbage.
This testimony clearly implicates the U.S. government, not only for knowing about ET existence, but for consorting with them on various secret programs.
The military was definitely in cahoots, so to speak, or in conjunction with the alien species to do this genetic management project, definitely, because they used the aliens for the technology to absolve them, probably the military or the US government or whatever, absolve them from, because this is just a bunch of people saying they were abducted by aliens. How crazy is that? So it's very easy to say, well, we have nothing to do with that. So it definitely was a joint venture.
Even more concerning, Sherman was targeted by the military from birth and manipulated to accomplish a specific agenda later in life, communicating with ETs.
I was just sat down and told that they needed I was a result of a genetic management procedure. My mother was abducted by an alien species, and that I was the result of it. And I happened to go in the military, and I happened to, they groomed me to go through this process, and here we are at the next phase of it, so to speak, and you're being told that you're a part of it. And you're going to be going to school and to uncover the ability and to learn to hone the ability, I guess. And they said that it was in support of a worldwide communications, a natural communications network through people, because there were going to be some sort of future event, and I don't even think he knew, the guy who was telling me, but there's going to be some sort of future event that is going to happen where all electromagnetic communications is going to be non-existent. And they needed some sort of network to communicate through.
Let's be perfectly clear. The military anticipated this need well before Sherman joined the Air Force. He was intentionally groomed for this post and its profound responsibility.
I think I knew ahead of time that I would eventually be communicating with an alien. It's just that it shocked me when it first happened because I didn't know when it was going to happen. But the actual communication happened, the first communication happened at my first PPD base, and it shocked me because it wasn't what I was normally used to. But until you experience something, it's always in the back of your mind like, oh, this is just cool. But then it becomes a part of your life. And once it becomes a part of your life and internalized, then it is what it is.
Different agencies in the government would task us, and we were directed by the government. We were actually a Army unit. We were never officially tasked with UFO or ET targets. It was always soldiers, plans and intentions of military and political leaders, research and development in foreign countries, what are they developing and all that. Now, if a general or a senator came by and said, I want to know something about UFOs, would you do a session for me? Here's a 3-star general asking a sergeant, will you do a session for me? What are you going to say, no? You don't say no. Many of the generals, senators and all that, they would come in saying, can you do this for me? Because I want to know if it's real. Because nobody in the government knows. I mean, this is probably one of the highest kept secrets.
In addition to well-known cases, requests for UFO and ET encounters filtered in through unofficial channels.
That businesses know more about it than the government does. If you farm something out to a company, the Freedom of Information Act doesn't apply. If I have a car repair place in DC and a senator comes in with a car that has problems and I fix his car, have I worked for the government or have I worked for the senator?
Clifford Stone never forgot his first encounter during a field exercise in 1969.
We went to Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania, what they call an FTX, field training exercise. And I know it was cold. Anyhow, right around midnight, maybe a little after midnight, at that time we were told it was a Russian aircraft that had crashed that we had recovered and was test flying and trying to do some field exploitation on it. When we got there, I saw these lights already set up, shining down into what looked like a crater and like a craft of some sort that looked like it was in the shape of the heel of a shoe. And this is the first time I met the guy, we always called the colonel. He says, do you have a Geiger counter in there? And I said, yes, sir. He says, okay, I need you to bring that Geiger counter out here. Then from this point right here, I want you to start walking toward the craft. And he says, I want you to call off your readings each time they go a little higher. So I started to walk towards the craft, and I called off the readings. When I got to the top of the berm, I looked down in there. And when I looked down in, I knew then that that was not unearthly craft. There was like a canopy, but then there's like a door shaped like a kidney was halfway open. And there was this entity halfway out, halfway in. And I could tell it was dead. And I started to call back out. I said, "Sir, I need an officer up here." He says, "Well, just tell us what you see, son." And I said, "No, sir, you don't understand. I need an officer up here." And he says, "Tell us what you see. Don't worry about it." And I said, "I don't think you understand, sir. What I see, it's not human. This is not an earthly craft. I need an officer up here." And, for about 10 minutes, it's the way it kept going. Then he goes ahead and says, "Come on back down, it's okay." And I got on back down. Then he says, "Okay, you go stay in your truck, and if we need you again, we'll call you out." I was pretty sleepy by this time, but trying to figure out what was it I saw and what was it? What type of craft was that in that ditch? When it got daylight, that's when they started to take the craft out. They went ahead, took the craft out, put it on an 18-wheeler, and tied it down tight so all you could see was the tarpaulin that you couldn't see underneath or what it was. There were several bodies. I know the one I saw, but there were several other bodies too. And I was told that, and I was told that by this guy I called the colonel. I said, "I don't have to go through this again." He says, "Well, son, that's kind of bad because you're probably going to be going through it again." And less than a month later, I was going through it again.
Programs like Project Moondust often trigger post-traumatic stress, which Stone endured throughout his life. Adding to the emotional pain, participants must keep these deeply troubling experiences buried in fear of military retribution.
Whistleblowers are the eyes and ears into the deep black world of these compartmentalized programs. Without the whistleblowers, we wouldn't know what was going on because you can't rely on documentation. You can't rely on government releases or what the military is willing to divulge in terms of its military equipment and hardware. So the whistleblowers are the key. And so that's why I always go to great efforts to protect and help the whistleblowers that I've worked with, as well as contactees, experiences, people who have had direct interactions with extraterrestrials, because they're our eyes and ears into what's really going on. So they need to be protected and supported as much as possible. And I've done that as much as I can, but it is a very difficult thing to do in a very hostile climate where people are under character assassination all the time.
Over the past 70 years, how many additional military personnel also followed orders to cover up or advance the USET agenda? Hundreds? Thousands? How many former and current military carry the immense burden of keeping the world's greatest secret? A former employee at the British Ministry of Defense, Nick Pope investigated UFOs to determine military significance. He knows the language used to describe UFOs and ET encounters is critical to understanding how far officials go to manipulate the masses.
Words are important whether one is trying to downplay the phenomenon or, as we've seen recently perhaps, arguably to escalate it and make it an issue. Language is important, but language, particularly in government, can be highly nuanced, and sometimes the choice of a single word or the juxtaposition of one word to another can completely change not just the emphasis, but it can arguably change the entire meaning. There was always guiding language and principles in terms of how we played this subject with the media and thus with the public. The standard message always went out, so the press office had key messages and defensive lines to take on this, and they were dismissive. We would deliberately use the phrase flying saucer when we knew that it had gone out years ago and that UFO was the terminology. So flying saucer made the whole thing seem dated and faintly ridiculous, and that was precisely the intent. The essential policy was to hold the line that this phenomenon is of no defense significance. Those three words, no defense significance, if something's in your airspace able to outpace and outmaneuver your fastest jets, I mean, how could that not be? Once we got the Freedom of Information Act in the UK, it turned out that the Ministry of Defence certainly at some times received more Freedom of Information requests about UFOs than any other subject. A decision was made to proactively dump the whole lot. The programme to declassify and release the British government's UFO files involved around the release of 60,000 documents of UFOs, some of which were classified secret UK eyes only. So clearly that nailed the lie that this was not a subject of any particular interest. So words matter, and I think one of the things that I hope that I can contribute to this subject is steering people through the murky world of government, and particularly the language we write and speak and what we actually mean by that. So I hope that I take things like these DIA letters, these press statements, and I say, look, this is the important bit. Watch this.
Since words do matter, a trend towards less dismissive and more engaged language regarding UFOs has us asking, why now?
The government and the military is grappling with this issue. Yes, sure, we're getting some specific cases like the Nimitz incident and some others, but predominantly what we're getting is, it's nothing to do with the public. We're getting an insider's view almost of what's been going on in government. And yes, that poses the question, why? Why now? What's changed? One answer is intriguing line in one of the US Navy statements where it starts off and it says, since 2014, there has been an increase in these incidences. Implication is clear. Before 2014, yes, there were cases, but nothing you could hang your hat on. Sighting here, radar blip there. In 2014, reading carefully, and I do this with my kind of government eye, or my ex-government eye, I read those statements, and sometimes it's the phraseology, sometimes it's what they don't say that's more important. I read that as effectively saying, in 2014 something changed. A line had been crossed. Everything else before was just a little bit here and there. Now it seems to be systemic. Frequent incursions, and the Navy went on to say, we need to find out what this is, and we need to find out a way to prevent it happening again. This is the language of conflict and hostility. There's a story here, and people are not yet being told the full story.
How would the military and major aerospace corporations respond to the discovery of, say, anti-gravity propulsion technologies? I mean, we know these technologies exist. I mean, in the 1920s, Thomas Townsend Brown actually came up with the first patent for anti-gravity propulsion systems. So these were technologies that were secretly understood and developed. And how would the military, over the succeeding decades, operationalize these kinds of technologies for weapon systems that they felt could deal with a threat that they didn't fully understand, which was extraterrestrial visitation? You know, the military isn't going to stand by idly. They're going to develop these things. They're going to do the research, and then they're going to operationalize whatever it is that they've developed into fleets, into squadrons, until they reach a point where they feel that they need to go public and disclose this to the rest of the world. And I think we're at that point, and that people who kind of like look at all of the data, look at the information showing that this phenomenon has been real and has been occurring for decades, they're going to be a step ahead of others who really haven't had that open mind, and they're going to be ready for some really stunning announcements about the kind of deep space capabilities that the US Air Force and the Navy, as well as other nations, have secretly developed in dealing with something that they have never fully quite understood, but now they feel they're at a level in terms of their procurement and research and development of advanced technologies where they can announce this to the public.
I think there's a debate to be had about the timescales of government release of UFO information. Clearly, some governments have disclosed years ago. The French government opened its files in 2007. British government followed suit in 2008, and that program actually was completed in spring 2019. You could say, yes, the French government disclosed everything, but it didn't really tell you much. What the French and British and others have disclosed is basically a public program. An awful lot of what's been released is just letters from the public saying, I was out walking my dog and I saw a UFO. That's not what's happening in the US. ATIP wasn't a public program. What's happening in the US is that we're getting this insight, an insider's view almost, of what's been going on in government. And yes, that poses the question, why? Why now? What's changed?
The government also is shifting from ridiculing abductees to taking a keen interest in their experiences. Something has definitely changed.
There's a whole bunch of people out there who claim that not only have they seen a UFO, but they've been on one. And I'm talking, of course, about the abductees, the experiencers, whatever the language you use. It would be odd in a way if, in investigating UFOs, you ignored those people. Turns out they didn't. I have some evidence to suggest that a number of people have been approached in recent years by people claiming that they're undertaking some sort of scientific or academic study. I mean, that scientific study would be true. It was. What I think those people didn't necessarily realize that the ultimate customer was the US government.
If the military is changing the conversation to a new narrative, what is it and why?
These governments have released information. It's true. But if you really look at what they've released, all right, they're releasing information because look, we're in the 21st century. We're not in the 1950s anymore. We have internet. So there's all of these citizens who are pushing for UFO data to come out. Governments can't stop all of that. They have to respond to it. So they release what they feel they can release. That's what we're seeing. So there is this movement from below, from the people, to get UFO data out to the world.
They're trying to bring it out to the public in a way that is acceptable, that makes it realistic and grounded, and that they feel that this is something they currently need to be concerned about. And they would say it's all under the guise of national security and we can't inform the enemies that we have this ability, that we have this technology. Maybe that's why it's time now, because it's gotten to not only are people ready for it, we can't keep it a secret anymore.
I hear a lot of people say with the Pentagon story and the Navy revelations, it's like we're building up to something. For once, I think there might be something to that. We unquestionably are in new territory. The language has changed. The conversation has changed. It's the government now that's effectively putting this story out. Because, look, if the government wanted to kill this story, it could do so in an instant. It could say something like, when we say unidentified aircraft, we 100% of the time mean aircraft, missiles, and drones. And ATIP was nothing to do with UFOs. It's just to do with far-term aviation threats, i.e. Russia and China. But that's not what they said. Just when the story looked as if it was dying down again, the US Navy used the phrase unidentified aerial phenomena. And in a previous occasion, just when the DoD seemed to have spun this as a story about aviation and aerospace, they added a little bit on to their press statement and said, including a number of unexplained incidents involving unique phenomenology. And that's why I say it's the government driving this, because A, they could kill it in an instant, and B, just when it is fading away, they say something to put it back in the headlines.
We're now in an era, I'm convinced, of a soft disclosure. I'm calling it controlled disclosure. In other words, assume that you're in with the secret keepers and you know everything that's going on. So you know this is real, you know that there are others that are here, whatever they are. They're not from here, they're not from our civilization. They've got an agenda, they're doing what they do. And you know that this is the case, and you also know, because we're well into the 21st century, that it's very difficult to keep this contained forever. You know it's going to come out. So the question is, how is it going to come out? So what you have to do, and this is what is being done right now, is you rebrand the UFO subject to UAP, unexplained aerial phenomena. And you siphon all the history out of it, which is what is really being done now, and you just pretend that none of that old history ever happened. All the old intercepts that went on in the 1940s and 50s and 60s and 70s that we know about, don't refer to any of that stuff. And you just say, yeah, there appears to be a phenomenon and we don't know what it is. Like, sure, they don't know what that is. But they're rebranding it as a way to control this narrative, and because they realize this has got to come out, and they want it to come out in a way that is manageable, that they can contain.
We are in completely new territory. Something different is happening. If disclosure isn't a spaceship in a hangar, if disclosure is there's something in our airspace, radar operators track them, pilots chase them, we can't catch them, it's worrying, we need to stop it, we need to find out. If that's what disclosure is, we're already there. We've had it.
If disclosure is upon us, and current messaging strongly suggests it is, what happens next? Regardless of the end game, the consequences of hybridization programs directly affect our future. And as more experiencers share their profound stories, as more whistleblowers have the courage to step forward, and as governments release more information about ET-operated UAPs, the collective consciousness of the planet will come to the conclusion that we are not alone. It's happening. So ask yourself these profound questions and ponder the possibilities. What if this is all true? And if disclosure is imminent, are you ready to face this reality?
Once in the light, government.